Is this bird speed skating on the water, or do those legs go down further? Find out next on Twits and Pishers. Hello there, fellow bird watchers, or should I say, aloha. I'm standing here, deep in the pickleweed, beside Kilauea Pond on the island of Maui in Hawaii. Beautiful, isn't it? This is one of the last refuges of the rare Hawaiian coot and the equally rare Hawaiian black-necked stilt. The main Hawaiian islands, isolated in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, were once home to dozens of unique birds that evolved here over millions of years, much like the situation in the Galapagos. Today, my quest, our quest, the quest is to look for native Hawaiian birds, birds that were here before the tourists, before the Europeans, Captain Cook, and before the Polynesians as well. And in order to do that, you know, there's not that many native birds left here in Hawaii. The birds that you see around you in the, you know, resorty places are mostly introduced birds. And in order to find the remaining native birds, you have to put a little effort into it. So this is one superb spot, and I'm going to catch up with Katherine Smith, the refuge manager here at the Kilauea Pond, and she's going to give me a tour of the coots and the stilts, and I can hardly wait because I love coots and stilts. Kilauea Pond lies in the lowlands west of Kihei, bordered by a very busy highway. Still, various birds come here every winter from as far away as Alaska and Siberia, so Kathy and I spent a few moments with these migrants. That's a sanderling, a common species on the mainland. And let's see, this one's a wandering tattler. At first, all shorebirds look the same, but trust me, it's enjoyable to learn to distinguish them. Let's start with this one, a jay-sized light gray bird with a dark bill and a dark patch behind the eye. This bird is twice as large as the sanderling behind it. Any guesses? It's a black-bellied plover in winter plumage when the belly is white. The sanderling is about the same color as the black-bellied plover, but with a shorter neck and a greater propensity to probe the sand while it walks. That one does have two legs, by the way. The larger, darker bird is a wandering tattler. We'll come back to it in a moment, but for now, take note of its pale legs. Now, there's a wandering tattler on one leg. Notice the facial expression with the dark lores, the area between the eye and the bill, and a long bill as well. Sanderlings here again with all of their legs on the ground. And let's see, there's another wandering tattler. Oh, this one's easy, a Hawaiian black-necked stilt towering above the sanderlings. Okay, now quiz time. There are three species out there, black-bellied plover. There's a Pacific golden plover behind it and a sanderling to the right. Notice how golden the golden plovers are. Let's have a closer look at this sanderling. Notice the dark shoulders. That's a good field mark for this species. Frantic little guys most of the time. The beach beside Kilauea Pond is also a place to look for shorebirds, and I was amazed to learn that hawksbill sea turtles have tried nesting here lately as well. Not a very easy thing to do with all the trucks on the beach. The pressures that the tourism industry places on an area like this are impossible to measure, and they never seem to let up. Much of the Kilauea Pond National Wildlife Refuge is a strange, snow-white expanse of something that is definitely not snow. The salt flats of Kilauea are terrible places for birds, but they do have their own fascination. The salt is pure white, and it tastes just like, you know, salt.
You ever a kid that had the salt dispenser where you just pick it up with your fingers and the old
No,
rock
I
salt
saw
kind?
that. Ooh,
Yeah, but this makes
After that treat, Kathy took me to one of the best spots to see the rare Hawaiian coot in a part of the refuge that owes its tranquility to the fact that it is out of bounds to all visitors who don't have special permission.
This area here is an inactive fish pond that's maintained by local children for the coots. And if you look over there, you can get a pretty good view of them.
Oh yeah, look, there's... Isn't that nice? The Hawaiian coot, a completely separate species from the mainland,
species,
the American
right.
coot. Oh, that's dandy. Excellent. Look at the size of the frontal shields on these things, is that?
They're really pronounced in the Hawaiian species here. They're very large compared to the mainland. They're much more diminutive.
It's a handsome look.
Yeah, it really is.
I
like the coots. And people like it when you just say the name coot. It cracks them up. And let alone have that Jimmy Durante snout there. So. And you see where the one's trampling down the reeds there?
Oh yes, I do.
And,
sure.
and sort of picking the tops off the bulrush. Well, bulrush is an important food item, and it only grows in these low coastal environments.
Is that a native species?
And this is
plant?
a native bulrush, right? Yeah. And we do have some introduced bulrush too that grow much larger.
But right now we're looking at the Hawaiian coot, the original native coot, eating a native plant,
right?
Just like it's been for thousands, if not millions of years.
That's right.
That's nice.
It's increasingly rare too in the Hawaiian Islands, because most of what you see here is introduced. The Paluchia vegetation here and the pickleweed that we see around, the sort of limey green colored rhizomatous plant, it's introduced. So when you actually get a native bird eating a native plant, we get excited about that.
I do too. What are their predators, or do they have parasites?
We've got a lot of predators in Hawaii. Most of them, once again, are introduced, although one is native, and that's the black-crowned night heron. And we see them here pretty frequently due to the fish ponds. And then just Kilauea Pond is pretty shallow and easy fishing for the native herons.
Oh, there's one just going by over
there.
Right.
Right. We see them flying around here a lot. In large numbers. They congregate here. Yeah, the young ones are the brown-streaked individuals.
And they can eat a whole coot?
Well, the babies, and they're known to take the hatchling. So here's a case of a native bird preying on a native bird. And as we lose shallow nesting habitat too, especially for the species like the stilt that like the shallow mud flats, then it becomes pretty critical because we've got less area, less cover for nesting, and more of the predators.
Coots are wonderful birds, but the truth is that very few birders find them as inspiring as Kathy and I do. On the other hand, the Hawaiian black-necked stilt is a guaranteed crowd pleaser. Look at them all. They're everywhere. This is easy. It was a piece of cake finding these stilts.
Well, we've got good habitat for them here. They like these shallow, reedy areas and the extended mud flats like this where they can walk around and stir up the insects.
Oh, they're fantastic. Look at the color pattern on this one here.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, we've got, at any given time, maybe up to 25% of the world population of stilts. There's only maybe 1,200 to 1,500 in the world. And we're fortunate that they call Kilauea Pond home.
That's the Hawaiian subspecies, or is that the whole species?
That's the Hawaiian subspecies.
Right, okay.
The endangered subspecies.
Yeah.
Here in Hawaii, they're known by the name of ʻiʻiwi, and that translates to one standing tall, which I think works pretty well. No, you can't. They're up there.
They're fantastic. Those long red legs and... What do they feed on here mostly? Do you know?
There's a lot of invertebrates in the mud, small worms, and then they'll also take the mosquito fish and guppies. And
do they breed right here?
They do. They like the shallow mudflat areas, such as we see out in front of us now. And their nests don't amount to too much. It's pretty much just a scrape in the mud, and then a few little stones and maybe a few twigs, and they'll lay their 4 eggs right there.
Well, 4 eggs, that's not a bad sized collection.
It gives them pretty good odds, except for all the predators that we have to worry about here, both avian and land. And the mongoose are pretty clever, and they'll swim shallow channels to get out to bird areas.
Those pesky monkeys.
Right. And then the herons that we see around this area too. Sometimes you'll see the herons will fly over close, and the stilts will sound off like this one is now.
Sure.
The herons are believed to take a certain number of the hatchlings. And they, by the way, look like their parents. They're real gangly, long-legged basketball players.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Kind of comical little spotted bird.
But without the crisp black and white pattern of the adults.
Right, they're a little better camouflaged.
Oh, they are really, really nice.
Yeah, they look show it really well.
Now, looking around here, you'd think this was a common bird, but you're telling me that this and a very few other places are the only spots on Earth where you can...
Right, Hawaii's lost a lot of its coastal wetlands, and it's the areas that the stilts like best. So it's a pretty limited land area that we're dealing with, and in Hawaii it's under pressure for development. So what we have is pretty precious, and that's why Kilauea Pond at 700 acres was a very large refuge by Hawaiian standards.
I'm delighted to see it here, and it's just wonderful to have all this almost natural land right in the middle of all this development.
Right, it's nice open space, and it's got some of the pressures of an urban refuge with a power plant in and the condos moving in. But they still manage to find enough habitat to hang in here if we can keep the numbers of predators down and keep the waterways open enough so that we'll have the shallow water habitat that they prefer for feeding and nesting.
I think these things are just wonderful. Doesn't it bug you that if you're a bird listing person, you can't make another check mark out of these things, whereas you can with the Hawaiian coot?
Oh, I think you, yeah, I think you should just go ahead and check it anyway.
Why not?
Yeah.
Write another box into your checklist.
I mean, there's only 1,200. You should get credit for seeing at least one of them.
I quite agree. Then suddenly among the stilts there appeared a bird that Kathy and I could not readily identify. It's light below, seems to have a slight darkness on the throat, or the foreneck and the breast.
Right, and then going white, the breast and the underbelly.
Marsh
sandpiper. More the sandpiper. Now that looks real good. That and the dark rump, that looks real good.
Although that's a breeding plumage, but it's
non-breeding plumage. It doesn't look. What's the distinction between the two?
A true birding challenge.
The yellowlegs and the red shanks.
This is a birding moment. This is an unidentified tricky shorebird. Oh, I got the tape going here. Let's look at it. Let's just record our thoughts here.
Yeah.
Very light colored bird. Grayish on the breast, up or down to about the level of the bottom edge of the folded wings. And it seems to have a light spot at the base of the neck in front as well within the gray area. A long straight bill. Looks like about the size of a greater yellowlegs bill. It's got more or less the proportions of a yellowleg to me, but you can't see the legs.
I've only seen yellowlegs in Alaska in the summer plumage, and
yeah, it doesn't look.
So he doesn't ring the yellowleg's bell, but that doesn't mean he's not one.
We sent copies of our videotape to a panel of experts, and eventually we all agreed that it was a greater yellowlegs, a sort of Tringa sandpiper, and a very rare bird for Hawaii. It wasn't a common green shank, it wasn't a red shank. We were convinced by its avocet-like feeding habits and a brief bit of tape that we got of the bird in flight. Fantastic. After that bonus sighting, and the bird was never seen again, by the way, I left Kilauea Pond and headed up the Haleakala volcano to look for native Hawaiian songbirds. This is the Hosmer campground, and we're somewhere above 6,500 feet elevation. Right away, you get the sense that this is a place where the native and the introduced species meet. The pine trees behind me are introduced. There are some eucalyptus trees, but there are also a few native trees and bushes around. And even though the first birds I saw when I got here were house sparrows with a spotted dove moving through the campground looking for little tidbits, there are apparently some fairly tame common amakihi here, and that's a member of the Hawaiian honey creeper family, the native honey creepers that are of such great interest and concern. And that sound you hear in the background, that's the Melodious laughing thrush. Beautiful name, but that is another introduced bird. Introduced birds everywhere, but oh, hey, look at that. That's the amakihi. That's wonderful. That's our first look at a native honey creeper. Do you like that little decurved bill? That allows them to feed on flowers or to pick up little bits from the ground. They're moochers here at the campground. That's why they're so tame. They're looking for scraps of food. Beautiful bird, though. The male is the brighter yellow, and those other ones, I don't know whether those are females or immatures, but this is great. The little black mask on their face too, it gives them almost a sinister look. I like them. Very cool birds. I joined Carol Gentz and Anime Shishido for a hike through the Nature Conservancy's Waikamaui Preserve in search of more species of honey creepers. Once in the right habitat, we didn't have to look far. This is a classic scene. These are native ohia trees, and they're in bloom, and the honey creepers are coming to the flowers to sip the nectar. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. This is the way it's supposed to be. There are some more amakihi here, which is really nice because it's much better to see an amakihi sipping at an ohia flower than it is to see them stealing breakfast at the campground. And those red fellows in there, the dark red ones, are apapane, which is another native honey. Isn't that a good-looking bird? The apapane. It's almost exactly the same color of red as the flower. Ooh, 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 hold on. That's an ʻiʻiwi. That is so good. I can't tell you how happy I am about that. That's one of the birds that I've most wanted to see in this entire world. My wife and I looked for it twice on the big island of Hawaii, and we never saw it. And oh boy, she's gonna be upset with me that I saw it without her. But still, isn't that a nice bird? Wonderful. Look at that bill. The bill, oh, it pokes right into the flowers like that. Total satisfaction. I sure hope these birds continue to do well. Apparently all three of these honey creepers, all three species, have large populations that are still doing well. So as long as the habitat remains, as long as bird diseases and other competitors and predators don't make their way into this part of the world, they should be okay. It would be a shame to lose them the way so many of the other honey creepers have disappeared from the face of the earth. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Right there in that native koa tree, Maui creepers. Maui creepers, that's another sort of Hawaiian honey creeper. It's another lifer for me. Notice that the bill is straight and not decurved, and it's a little plump bird, more plump than the common amakihi. Oh, that's good. That's good. It's almost, you know, it's a privilege to see a bird like that. But let me give you a few pointers on birding in these forests in Hawaii. Move slowly, use your ears as much as your eyes, and be very patient, because these birds are not, you know, they hide a lot. They're not really bold, and most of them don't respond at all to pishing and squeaking. You can try it if you want, but if you're not the sort of person who likes to pish and squeak, it's a good place to avoid it, because you've got a good excuse. That's really something. Now, ooh, and you know, apparently the Maui parrotbill sometimes moves with the Maui creepers, and that's a very rare thing, even more rare than these. These are found only on this island, so who knows, maybe we'll find a Maui parrotbill if we're extremely careful and extremely observant. Well, this looks like a nice spot to stop for a minute and think about these honey creepers. The Hawaiian honey creepers evolved here on the Hawaiian Islands from a single ancestor, and the ancestor of the entire group was some sort of a finch, a carduline finch, as they say, something like a house finch or a goldfinch, something like that. And that one ancestral lineage then began to divide into two and more, and so on and so forth, and to produce what biologists call an adaptive radiation, where all of the different lineages radiated out into the adaptive space, as they say, to form birds with different shaped bills, different sorts of habits, to form a tremendous array of species. And now, the end product of all of that evolution, millions of years worth, is a tremendous group of birds, some of which are quite finch-like still, some of which are anything but finch-like. Some of them are warbler-like, some of them have tremendous long thrasher-like bills, and some of them have bills like parrots or like grosbeaks, and a whole mess of funny-looking little green birds, some of which are absolutely unprecedented and quite unlike anything that you're going to see anywhere else. The unfortunate thing is that so many of them have become extinct already. The good thing is that there are still some left for us to appreciate and enjoy. Not all of the native forest birds are part of the Hawaiian honeycreeper group, though. There was a native crow. It's almost extinct. There's a tremendous effort still in place to try to bring it back. And there were some other wild-looking native birds, like the bishop's o'o. For 80 years, everyone thought that this bird was extinct, and then it was rediscovered somewhere around here, in fact, in 1981. No recent sightings, but who knows, it might still be there. In fact, it's a bit strange when you're looking through the field guide to see so many species illustrated that are extinct. But there's still that hope that someone will see one of these birds and recognize it, and that's why the pictures are still there in the guide. We never did find a Maui parrotbill, nor did we see the crested honeycreeper, another bird that is within the realm of possible for the visiting birder to see. No bishop's o'os, no nukupu'us, and no po'oulis either. Still, I was pleased and happy with the day's sightings and kept on looking while I still had the chance. "16 of the 30 species we saw on this expedition were naturally occurring, so the introduced birds haven't won out yet. I consider this a respectable list. Oh, and by the way, we had to subtract one species from our ongoing total since we accidentally counted the horned lark twice a few episodes back. Sorry about that. Well, that's too bad. That's all the time we have to go looking for native birds in Hawaii. Maybe next time I'll go all the way up to the top of the volcano here and look for the nene goose. This has been probably my favorite expedition to date. I've really got a kick out of seeing some of those tremendously rare birds, birds that live here and nowhere else. Everything from the coots and the stilts down at the Kilauea pond up to the forest birds, the Hawaiian honeycreepers in the preserve on the east slope of the volcano. It seems to me that these birds now have at least some chance of surviving. They've got people who care about them. They've got habitat set aside for preservation. But you know, between that little tiny preserve up there and that little tiny preserve down there, everything else around us has been changed completely, forever, by the actions of people. So who knows what's going to happen? I hope it'll work out well, but who knows? Anyway, now that this comes to a close, I have to admit, it's time to go home. Back to snowy, cold Alberta, where there are still birds, and I hope you'll join us next time when we explore the subject of winter bird feeding. Yahoo! What an interesting subject. I'm sure I'll be psyched up for it by the time it comes around. For the moment, it's very beautiful here. Aloha. remember, you only have one more week to get your title suggestions in for our title contest.